Okay, everyone, we might make a start. Sorry for the late beginning. Had a few issues. So, welcome everyone to the November meeting of the Space Association of Australia. My name is Michael Abdillah. I'm the Vice President of the Association. Our President, Peter Aylward, isn't with us tonight. He's working in Queensland somewhere. But he is joining us hopefully via live stream of this event. Now, Peter has prepared this presentation, so I haven't seen it yet, but I do know what we're doing tonight. So, first of all, we're going to talk a little bit about our plans and remind you about our social event coming up on the 18th of December, which will be held here in this room, and also a look ahead to some considerations we have to make about our meetings for next year. At 7:30, we're going to have a report on a journey to the US to witness the August 2017 total eclipse, the total solar eclipse, that is. And we have one of our long-time members, Patricia Larkin, with us today. She's also a member of the Astronomical Society of Victoria and a very active member of that society, and looking forward to hearing about that journey. I know that another of our members, Ian Barry, also made the journey. I think he had a slightly less successful time. Would that be a correct statement? So we might be able to prevail upon Ian he might be able to make a few comments as we go through to let us know how his trip went. We'll have a break after that. And then our retrospective section, we're going to look at two 50th anniversaries that occurred this month. As always, there are a number of other anniversaries, but these are the two ones we're going to focus on tonight, and they're both 50th. The first is the first launch and flight of the Saturn V. That was Apollo 4. And it's also the 50th anniversary of WRESAT 1, the Weapons Research Establishment Satellite, number 1, which commemorates the first launch of an Australian satellite. And then we'll finish off the night with our usual space news, a roundup of news from around the place, and also some planetary and space science missions. Okay, so quickly, our final meeting for the year will be held on the 18th of December. Please note that this doesn't follow the normal formula. This is the third Monday, not the fourth Monday. Yes. So, and it's going to be the 5th annual Space Association Space Trivia Night. So brush up on your space trivia. Come along. We'll form some informal teams, and if the last 4 trivia nights are anything to go by, it will be a lot of fun, and a good night will be had by all. So please, I encourage you to come along. So this is like a social event. It's not our normal kind of public meeting, but everyone is welcome, both members and non-members. So please come along. 2018 meetings. We have a little bit of a question mark after that. And that's because the association quite likely needs a new venue for next year. So basically, Peter received a phone call from the president of this RSL and basically informed us that for next year they're going to charge a room hire fee of $250 per meeting. We currently get this room for free. And unfortunately our organisation doesn't meet the RSL's charitable requirements under the current conditions. And Peter did discuss what these discussed the community obligations of RSLs with regards to gaming machines, and we felt that we did qualify in this area as we are a non-profit educational group. However, that the RSL didn't feel that we met the normal requirements. He did indicate that we might be able to work something out, so Peter is still in negotiations with the organisation.
Michael, can I suggest I want a refund on my membership for next year if we don't? As in RSL membership. I've just paid it tonight.
Oh, really?
I did not say boo.
No, no.
They wouldn't.
So,
That's a good point, actually. That's a very good point.
yeah.
If we're all members, we just happen to be RSL members here talking space.
And that's the thing. We did point out to them the arrangements under which we were given the free use of the venue, the fact that quite a few of us, we believed, had taken out membership.
Who has got membership? Just a minute.
Yep.
2018 membership.
Yeah, 2018.
Yep, yeah. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So there's 10 in this room, and there's a number of people who aren't here tonight that are regulars. And so that's useful to know.
But the thing is that they're actually looking at, are they going to use this room then?
Probably
Not.
Probably not really.
Well, no, because
They're losing out on sales.
we've pointed that out to them. We've pointed that out to them. But this is the position that we're at the moment.
Would
Yep.
they negotiate a lower figure? Like $50 rather than no dollars? You know,
Make sure you repeat what people say.
this is what we're trying to work out, Angelo.
Oh, okay. Yes.
We had a meeting last week and this is what we discussed. We're trying to work out what our options are.
Yeah. So,
Your argument was that they're only getting 10 meals a month, and our argument is, well, it's 10 meals you wouldn't have. Correct.
Yeah.
Where they got that figure from, we don't know anyway.
yeah,
I would have thought on a busy night there'd be more than 10 meals.
I would have thought so as well.
Yeah.
Plus desserts and a few other desserts.
Yeah. And I only joined the RSL because of the spaces.
Precisely.
Spaces.
Yes.
And
There's obviously a few different drinks in that meal.
Yep.
Agree.
So, yeah. So, sorry to cut short the conversation, but I just want to get through this. So, Peter has met with the RSL representative face to face, and they confirmed the general policy shift. The President and General Manager did leave open the possibility that we might be able to come to some sort of mutual agreement, but they didn't provide any sort of specific details or what that might have to include to, allow them to let us remain. The committee had a sort of an emergency meeting last week to discuss, and we discussed to develop some kind of a proposal to more closely align the Space Association to the RSL purpose and charitable activities, and also to investigate alternate venues, because we're just not sure how this is going to play out. So some of the kind of suggestions that we're playing with to see how many of these, if any of these, would be sufficient to persuade the RSL. We had some ideas about adding RSL promo videos and sponsorship on our live stream and webcasts, to add the RSL event schedule to our website, Meetup and Facebook accounts. We also discussed the idea of offering 10% discounts to our members if they were also members of the RSL, to basically to encourage more of our membership to be members of the RSL as well. But we're also interested in some information, some data, so we're wondering if there are any of our members who have some kind of military service record. There's one there. Thank you. And also to try and get a more firm idea of exactly how many of us are RSL members now. So we know that there are at least 10, but we might need to do a bit more investigations with those who aren't here tonight.
You can tell them that of the 14 or 15 people present, 10 were members at the November meeting.
Yes.
Not bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll become a member if it helps.
Well, you know.
Would be a condition of being a member of the SAA that you become a member of the RSL. It's not that expensive.
It's $30 a year. Oh, that's nothing. And you start off with $20 a credit. Yeah, that's absolutely. And from then on, you get to
And I suppose it would also be interesting to know how many of members of the RSL attend the RSL, this particular RSL, or any RSL, I guess, outside of our meetings, which is probably.
Well, interestingly enough, the Caravan Club down here is also, well, the Flight Saucer Club is also closing down. They're moving to other venues. I suspect, another one of these deals was given to them, and they just chose to get out. So they're going to lose a lot of clientele out of those.
They haven't thought it through. It's a law of unintended consequences.
Absolutely, they haven't thought it through at all.
So I think it could be. It could be. That could be just a polite way of saying that. Okay. So in terms of alternate venues, we're looking at some central Melbourne CBD type venues that charge low or no fees. Some of the suggestions so far are the Docklands Library, City Site,
That's in Flinders Street.
which is in Flinders Street, yeah.
Yeah, but they don't have food.
The issue there is that they don't serve food, so if we wanted food, we'd have to somehow order that in. So it gets a bit messy from that perspective.
Where the Victorian Skeptics Association meet, where they have free use of the, there's a function room.
Okay, yeah.
Most people order, it's an Italian restaurant, most people order downstairs.
Okay.
You go to the meeting up.
Do you mind finding out the name of the restaurant? Oh, okay. Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So part of the thinking, by the way, about moving to a more central venue is, it's a bit of a catch-22. Most of our membership, to be honest, is in the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne, to be perfectly honest, and sort of northeast. But we have very few members from the west or north. But equally, one of the complaints or issues that I've been told is that people from the west or the north find it very difficult to get here through peak hour traffic for the start of our meeting. So it's a bit of a trade-off. It means that even we currently have, most of our membership in the east, we're wanting to move or potentially move our meetings to the centre, but we may then pick up extra people who otherwise wouldn't either be members at all, or if they are members, attend very few meetings because they live in the west. And I know one person, for example, I know one person in particular who is a member, but finds here from the western suburbs. So
I plotted the geographical centroid of the membership about a year ago. It was round about Glen Iris.
I think that has changed, though. We have picked up some other members. Anyway, so I'm trying not to labour this, but it's a bit difficult to.
And there's Oakley RSL as well.
Oakley RSL.
Yeah, where we used to be.
The problem with our Oakley RSL was was threefold. One was it had become too small for us. Since we've been at this venue, we've had up to 37 people at a monthly meeting that we just would not fit in the venue at Oakley. Secondly, it's further east. That's another issue, and basically. I can't remember the details now, but the reason that we moved here, one of the other reasons we moved here, is because they were asking us to pay much more there as well. Because there we were paying about $25 a month, which is quite doable. A tenth of what this organisation is asking per month. but they were asking for somewhat more than that, and we decided that, as I say, I can't remember the details, but given the smallness of the venue and the fact that it was further east, we made a decision to come here. And the noise, that's right. That's the third point, was the noise.
They got rid of, the noise-making part of it, which was what was that, Sue, who ran that little...
Yes.
She had to leave as well.
Oh, no, I think they're still there.
Are you sure?
Well, they were certainly there. Immediately after we left, they were certainly still there.
Okay.
I think they're still there. The caravan clerk, yes.
So it's funny because the Tripoli Rotary Club still meets there and they've never charged us.
Wow.
How many people do you get at the meetings? How many people?
Oh, a dozen, 20, 15 sometimes.
So I don't know what that's about, but yes.
We eat a lot of Parmigianas though. So
That's right. That would be. That would do it.
Maybe a meal is mandatory.
We had a notional figure of what the charge was for this place because it was offset against the sponsorship, but we don't know whether it was $1,000 a week sponsorship and donation or...
From memory, it was around. The notional figure was around $75, something like that.
Because I would argue, even though if it was much, much better for me to get to and everything else,
Yes.
I would say $50 a month on this place just because of the
Yep.
nature of the place, even though it takes me more than twice as long to get here.
Yes.
I prefer to come here than over.
One of the best venues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're buying $250 worth of meals a month anyway.
So, basically, obviously we need to try and work something out before our January 2018 meeting, one way or the other. So, if you can help in any way, if you can give us any suggestions, we would like...
Let's start a petition. Why don't we all sign something here and send it to the manager?
Yep, perhaps.
That was one of the reasons I asked about the figure. I mean, we're already paying, say, $75 a month anyway, so it was another $125 a month if we're still getting a sponsorship.
Yes.
It'd be bloody great to me.
Yes.
It's the way you present the mathematics to some degree. We're getting it for nothing. So I think we should be putting down a note and put on our books what it's costing us per month and how much donation or sponsorship we get. So if anything like this ever came up, we've got a figure to plug in straight away.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I don't think there'd be an alternative group having this venue on Monday night, would there?
Probably not.
No, so therefore,
But we've...
not restricting
Yeah.
we're not restricting their income earning capacity.
No.
They've looked
No.
to the line item on their books.
Yes.
Room hire, and it says 0, and then we've got to
Well,
do something about it.
Yeah, and it's a new committee. It's certainly a new president and possibly a new committee as well. Anyway, look, sorry, I don't want to spend all night talking about this, but if you do have any suggestions, if you've got any sort of non-negotiables, like if you feel that we really must have a venue that provides meals, we need to hear that information as soon as possible so that help us make a decision.
Well, show of hands.
Sorry, Mike.
Yep.
This puts a new disposition on the space problem.
Indeed.
Michael, sorry
Yep.
to drag it out.
Yep.
One question, if I could ask, and Pat might not want to answer it. Was there any influence through family issues with you, Pat, about getting this thing? Sorry? Do you think your relationship helped there or not?
Is he still
Your
present?
brother or brother-in-law?
Yeah.
Was that a big help to us at the time, or was it just coincidental?
I'm not sure when we tried to get an extension here, could have been. Because when we first came here,
He knew about us and knew
Yes,
before
and-
we actually signed up, I know that.
yeah, I think he did say something. Going back a bit.
Oh, we spoke to him in the lounge one night after the...
He's often here.
We did.
Where do the Marsh people have their meetings, Mike?
The Mars Society, the Melbourne chapter, they meet in a restaurant. It often changes, but they often only have like 6 people, and they have no facility to, you know, project videos or play music or do anything. That's my understanding. Also, the Melbourne chapter of the National Space Society of Australia has also started up. They're meeting at RMIT because one of the facilitators is a lecturer at on staff anyway at RMIT. But again, there's no, and it would be possible that we could get something, say, at RMIT for no or small cost, but then we run into the problem of not having food if that is something that people really, really want. And in recent years, it certainly has become a feature of our monthly meetings.
In Tripoli, before we moved to OPR, so we had church hall, but we used to meet at the local Italian restaurant beforehand.
Right.
And then go to the meeting.
Yeah. So yeah. So we you know, it may be that if we might have to do something similar if people are keen on that. So, but certainly these are at the bottom of this list. There's some of the kind of some of the factors, some of the characteristics that we're looking for. We, you know, obviously seem to prefer on-site meals. We need to be able to have and use AV facilities. We have our own data projector and our own screen now. We need to be able to darken the room. We need it to be quiet. It needs to be accessible by public transport. Within 10 kilometres of the CBD, ? Parking, safe, and relatively inexpensive. So if people have any thoughts about any of this stuff, please let us know. Speak to one of the committee members, or send an email to spaceflight@space.asn.au.
Mike?
Yep.
Could we have a show of hands of people who really want to eat at these meetings? I'm serious.
Sorry, what was that?
Food. How many people really want to eat at these meetings?
Right, okay, yeah, well, okay. Show of hands?
Is it mandatory that we eat at meetings, or
No,
is it desirable that we eat?
No, well, it sounds like there's about 25%.
Yeah, we might do that, yeah. Yeah, we might, that's a good idea. We might put a survey together with asking a number of these different questions and send it out to all of the members and see what responses we get. Certainly the issue about having food on site, it certainly does help. There are many people who come here straight from work, for example, or don't have time to go home, have something to eat, and then go out to the meeting. So for those people, obviously, actually having meals on site is, if not a deal breaker, certainly very, very convenient. I'm sure for some, it may be the difference between coming or not, but, you know, that's what we need to know.
I don't know if I'm typical, but what I do is I plan each month. I know that I'm coming to this meeting. I plan to not go home.
Yes.
I know I'm coming here to have a meal.
Yes.
I have to reorganise that and get home from work or school earlier and make sure I had something to eat before coming here.
Yes.
Or some other arrangement, like David said, meet at a restaurant or something like that. But then our meetings would be starting much later. You know, if we all met at 6:30 to 7:30 or 8 o'clock, the meeting wouldn't be starting till 8 o'clock.
Okay.
A little bit further away from the mic.
Okay. All right. Look, as the little slide says, let's have a meeting to discuss future meetings about planning meetings. We need to move on. So.
This would be the third, actually. Who's putting the questions together?
Mr. Tim Franken. That's why it's a Frankenhard trivia night. And this will be the third time that you've done it, is that correct? Yeah. Yep. Okay, so that's what's coming up on December the 18th. Just a reminder about those of you who may not have... exactly, yeah. Renewed memberships, and with that we'd better stop because we are now well and truly behind time. Oh yes, and as with last month, we've got a number of books that belong to an associate of the Space Association. He's not a member, but he's Mr. Ian Wally. This is the fellow who has a large space-related collection of not only books but other memorabilia and so on. He's been forced to move out of his home, and he's looking for, he's trying to sell off his books. There are a number of books on the table. They have prices on them. If you want to purchase them, please see Tim Franken there, and he will look after you. So just to let you know, this is not a space association, money-making thing. This is to help support this guy who has some significant health issues, and because we don't want to see these books just literally taken to the tip, because that's a distinct possibility if we don't find a home for them, but at the same time we're trying to help this guy out. But yeah. Okay, we might move on to our first speaker of the night, which is Patricia. Sorry for the late start, and
put a glass of water down. Oh, no, not very dicey. That's just for the time. That's right. Good evening, everyone. I'm not sure if you hear me now. Hello to everyone. Now, what I want to share with you tonight, as the slide says, fortunate enough to see the total eclipse in Wyoming recently, but it was also went to a few astronomy facilities as well, and I've added just a few scenes because we actually started. Well, the astronomy trip, we joined Astro Trails from England. That was in Montana. And I'll show you why I've got something on paleontology and geology, mainly just some scenes, because I often think the amateur astronomer is into geology, paleontology. And just to show the progression from Montana, and we ended up down in South Arizona. Now, we started off our fabulous paleontology museum in Bozeman in Montana. And I won't go on too much with this because we're running short of time, but I think it was the best paleontology museum I've ever seen. And Montana is a site for quite a lot of fossil finds. And something that took our eye here at the Taylor Planetarium, where we saw a show, was commemorating Wally Schirra, the astronaut who was with the 3 missions. And he's actually a member of the Charlie Russell Riders. And this is a group of men who meet each autumn in Montana. And they, through their generosity, they support the Museum of the Rockies with regard to cultural, historical preservation of animals. So that was just an item of interest. And there was a few little space artefacts there which were on display. No.
Bozeman? Is that all in Bozeman?
Yes. I don't think it's the capital of Montana, but it was a fairly big town. But the Taylor Planetarium was right in the Museum of the Rockies, but a terrific museum. Had a lot of cultural things too, but was mainly paleontology. Now, just before we get to the eclipse, we went through Yellowstone, and I hope I get this little video clip running. To the right.
One more click.
Like a stripe in it. Wow. So this is, as it's named, Old Faithful. Wow, we were sure we would be able to see this. It's about every hour. Hear the noise. And Yellowstone really appealed to the interest in geology, which four of us travelling together had. I don't want to zoom out. It's Old Faithful with surrounding entertainment. Yes, this is. Okay, now, lucky enough to, I'm not sure of everyone's interest in solar eclipses, but I've just put a slide there showing the geometrical alignment. As you can see, this is really to scale. Now, a little pointer. I can do it with the mouse. No? Just want to point to the shadow. Okay.
Just be careful you don't. This button here.
Right, so that small cone there, you have to be...
You need to put it up on the screen.
Right, the path of total eclipse. So as you can imagine, they entail quite a bit of travelling because it's a relatively small path. The penumbral area there was the part of the Earth in partial eclipse, and the whole of the United States, including Alaska, was in a partial eclipse zone. Now, this was quite a draw card, this eclipse, because it was very accessible. As you can see, it crosses the whole of the United States. So, gosh. Sorry about that. So it went right down from Oregon and Idaho. We were down here in Wyoming and Nebraska, Missouri, a little bit of Georgia, right down, Tennessee, right down to South Carolina. And that's the latitude from where we saw the eclipse. And we chose Wyoming, like I think most people travelling in America did, because of the open plains country. We ended up at Bass Lake near Shoshone. Also, it seemed to have the best weather predictions. And as I said, nothing to obstruct our field of view, no trees, mountains in the way. And we set up in a rather rough and ready RV park, which was a bit dull looking, but anyway, we were there for the eclipse. Now, these are the four who we all travelled together. Jim, over here, has seen 12 total solar eclipses. I've been lucky enough to see 5. And 2 of our friends, we said they were initiated with the Wyoming eclipse. And this is Jim here with his trusty telescope, which he takes on eclipse trips, because it's fairly portable scope. I'll just go back for a minute. It's a bit hard to see there, but one of the ladies is holding what we came to call the Ned Kelly shade. Most people use what museums give out, the little cardboard eclipse glasses, but she had something different. Became affectionately known as the Ned Kelly eclipse shade. And I can't resist this high technology, the half sheet of paper. She went to a museum and made it with her grandson. And I think it's actually better than the Eclipse glasses. And tells you how to cut it, the dimensions. And the mylar filter is the safety material. And then tape it all together on the wrong side. Guess that's obvious. But I love the way the instructions said to bend to suit the face. And that's Anita using this. Don't forget, as the Americans said, the popsicle stick to hold it. And one advantage was better if you're already wearing spectacles. Now, that exciting time, I always find this exciting. A lot of people don't think much of the partial phases. But I always say when the sun takes that first bite, or the moon takes first bite from the sun. And we saw a few sunspots, about 3 groups and a couple of individual ones. A little bit hard to pick them on the photos. I was actually drawing them through the partial phases. I thought I was a great scientist doing this. And of course, as you go further into partial eclipse, some of the sunspots disappear. The moon's covered them. Now, if you look, you might be able to see one, well, a little bit difficult. There's one sunspot still remaining during this photo. And this is when the light takes on a bit of an eerie colour, grey, sort of blue colour. And that crescent sun, it's interesting to project it. I was on a cruise once seeing an eclipse, and I just happened to be holding a cracker biscuit. I think it was Salada with about 9 or 12 little holes in it. And it showed all the crescent suns through it on the deck of the ship. Or through leaves on a tree, a straw hat. So as we approach totality, the moon shadow looks like a thunderstorm without the noise. And of course that envelops everything in its path. And when the sun's a very thin crescent, you can see it's known as Bailey's beads. It's the last few rays shining through valleys on the moon. Now, something that's interesting to look at, it's fairly clear there, it's a lunar profile put out by, I'm not sure it was the Naval Observatory used to put them out. The Fred Espenac. He's known as Mr. Eclipse. It's from this publication. But you can see there the uneven edge of the moon. And on a previous eclipse, we were looking at this profile. And if you see a fairly large valley, that one, not as pronounced as another eclipse, you think you might see a larger remaining spot of sunlight which will form like a diamond on a ring just before totality. So that diamond effect there is the very last bit of sunlight shining through, or the last valley of the moon to be covered. Now the corona, it's spread out into, you can see there like 3 streamers. And we're at approximately sunspot minimum at the moment, and it always intrigues me, you get a more interesting corona, whereas if you're near maximum, the corona tends to be more even all around, which I've seen from another eclipse. And the shape of the corona is determined by magnetic activity. And as I said, it's more spectacular during minimum. And apparently the magnetic activity on the solar surface, it reacts with hot plasma and you get magnetic lines of force. And apparently even now there's no available technology to actually map the magnetic field in the corona at resolutions. It can be mapped as you can in a partial eclipse. Oh, sorry, total eclipse.
Isn't that spacecraft, Andrew, going to the
You can map it, but apparently during a solar eclipse, must have the eye sees it, I guess, but no technology actually sort of maps it at the resolution that you'll see it during a total eclipse. And in the corona, you see these spikes, which are also known as polar brushes, and these are the lines of force, and they fan out above the north and south poles of the sun. And I always say this is the fastest, was 2.5 minutes, this eclipse. They vary, but a lot of them are only about 2.5 or 3. And it's about the fastest 2.5 minutes I think you'll ever experience. And a few details here of what we could see because the sky was darkened. Jupiter was a long way out. And you could see the red chromosphere too around the moon. And this gives you the effect of the diamond ring too, just for totality. And a few prominences you can see there. Which look real new. I think there's one, can't see, I think I remember one sort of down the bottom there. And this apparently was the most, it's quite documented, the most watched total eclipse in history. We didn't get a traffic jam going to the eclipse, thank goodness. We got up some ungodly hour to get there, then we had plenty of time. But when we were leaving, we were caught up in the traffic jam. And just something of interest here about Thomas Edison. He total eclipse in 1878, and it's quite documented. He set up in a chicken coop, and with a bit of fun put in, the birds drove him mad. But he set up in the chicken coop to just get a bit of shade, I guess. And he tried out one of his inventions, the thermometer, but apparently the results were inconclusive because of the sensitive nature of it. Now, rather a general comment, people have often said to me, what's the best way of seeing an eclipse? By land, sea or air? And I hate to brag, I've been lucky enough to see it in those 3 ways. Jim multiplies it all by about 3. Or maybe not 3 by air. And these are just some of the... Seeing one by air is often dictated because the eclipse is in a very accessible region on the Earth's surface. There's very little landfall. But on land, you can study the effect of wildlife, so you won't get that in the air. By sea, you can relocate, and we've had this with a cruise ship. And the ship ended up turning and going right through this, looked like a thunderstorm, and everyone was horrified. We're all out on the deck of the ship, mapped out our little area of deck where we were going to observe the eclipse. But he obviously had predictable weather, and he sort of came out the other side of this squall. So by sea you can relocate to a certain extent. Now by air, I have seen one by air. One advantage is you're above the clouds, so you're not so much at the mercy of the weather. But you don't see another culture of a country where you might be seeing the eclipse. So I remember one in Bolivia, that really stood out, the different culture. Some of the Indian people still had a fear about the sun being eaten by a dragon. And it was just interesting being with that culture. The only culture you might see by air, maybe a lot of wealthy Americans, I think, similar to the cruise ships. I would say the most interesting culture is the eclipse chasers themselves. They're a culture unto themselves. One thing seeing an eclipse by air, totality is just slightly extended. And there was an experiment done in about 1976 with Concorde. And because of the speed, the phase of total eclipse was extended to about an hour and 10, hour and 20 minutes. And I mentioned this to the director of the Astronomy Society's Solar Studies section recently. And I said, oh, wouldn't that be wonderful? But he thought that would spoil it. I guess the chase had gone. So that was an interesting sort of comment. But I reckon, who cares how you see it? Just go for it if you've got a chance. So this eclipse hardly finished, and we're discussing the next one. And this is a disease of they're called ecliptophile or umbrophile, you can take your pick. The eclipse is hardly finished, and you start discussing from where you'll see the next one. So we're successful with the weather. We're very lucky because you can have good predictions somewhere, and Wyoming was probably about the best, but you only need one morning of rain, and we could have missed it. Now, when we left Wyoming, our love of geology took us to BRYCE Canyon, which is spectacular. And the four of us seem to have this real interest in geology, like all amateur geologists. And it's got a good photo of the four of us. That was so hot there. Oh. Jim and I walked down into the canyon. I don't know what the temperature was, must have been over 40. And as we head a little bit further south, the Antelope SlorCanyon, I'd only heard of it just before the trip, and that's fascinating. If you're ever over there that would be just into Arizona, or still in Utah, just into Arizona. And of course Grand Canyon, which probably a lot of people have seen. And sorry to rub it in, but someone has to do these things. Took a flight over the canyon, that was wonderful.
Was that sunset or anything like that?
We went, I think it was around about midday. The previous one, we did.
No, the helicopter flights.
No, we went pretty much the middle of the day. We saw the sun setting over the canyon on another day. But we saw quite a lot of Grand Canyon and an Indian place called the Tower, I think it was. Had a lot of Indian, I suppose, hieroglyphs. That was fascinating, and we viewed the canyon from there too. So then we get back into our astronomy facilities, METEOR crater, which I know quite a few of you have been to. When you get there, you're greeted by, this is fairly new, and we were impressed with the visitors centre now. I was there in the 90s, and it was okay, but it's really something now, the visitors centre. I couldn't get all the names at the back of the wall, I'll show you, but it lists every American astronaut, including those deceased, from the 3 missions, Mercury, Gemini and Apollo, included Skylab, the space station, and all the STSs. So that's what you're greeted with now, but I couldn't, there's so many people, I was trying to photograph the names. So we looked mainly for Andy Thomas and Scully Powers. But I found the METEOR crater, I think I got more out of it going this time. It illustrates collision and impact processes, and this played a dominant role in the development of planets, asteroids, and comets. And Gene Shoemaker once said that without impact, Earth, Mars, Venus, and Mercury wouldn't exist. So it's really important. It's a place of learning, I think. And also, under the guidance of Gene Shoemaker, astronauts did, which is probably well known, a lot of their geology field training there. And what's so interesting is all the ejecta. By the astronauts going there, they could see sort of what's come from the floor of a crater. They could see the ejecta, well, they were hoping ahead then.
How big was the meteor that created
I have heard this. I don't think it was that huge, actually. I think or whatever went over Tunguska in Russia, Siberia, well, they think that could have been, that didn't hit the ground. There's still speculation, but I remember thinking the size was given on what that might have been, and Meteor Crater wasn't all, I don't think it's all that big. I mean, it wasn't, never heard it was 50 kilometres across. I have heard, but I can't remember that.
My recollection, Pat, is it was in the order of about 50.
Yeah.
About 50 kilometres?
Meters.
Yeah, I was going to say. I have heard, and I remember thinking that's not very big, and yet to see what it's created. And originally it was thought that it was volcanic activity that caused it, and someone who deviated from that was I think it was a pastoralist, Barringer, after whom it's named. So he reckons it was an impact, the cause was impact, so he was apparently on the right track. And the only known mechanisms could have been an impact, something from outer space, as like a natural cause, or artificially through a nuclear explosion. And scientists could see that it hadn't been caused by a nuclear explosion. And Gene Shoemaker was very knowledgeable on that because of his work in the Nevada desert. And he'd found in Nevada quartz under massive pressure causes a couple of different minerals, and it has to be massive pressure to cause that. So, and hadn't been nuclear explosion, so impact is the generally accepted cause.
I was under the impression that piece of meteorite in the visitor centre, which was...
Yeah, I saw that.
...is nickel iron, and that was part of that particular thing, I thought.
Really? That was a piece of the ejector. It's about this big.
Yeah, we did see that.
Nickel iron.
Yes. Next up, Lowell Observatory, which a few of you have been to. And what it's noted for, we had quite an extensive talk actually by this guide, and I thought he was never going to stop. He was terrific. And actually the guides everywhere we went were really great. And something, actually I digress for a minute, I meant to mention with Meteor Crater about impacts. When we were at the Paleontology Museum in Montana, that was an excellent guide talking on the dinosaurs. But there was no mention that a meteorite hit may have caused their demise. And I was so surprised from a museum that focused on this. And I think it was a child or young teenager naturally asked, how did the dinosaurs disappear? But the guide sort of edged around it, said, oh, some creatures, they compete, but never really answered. And I was amazed that something to do with a meteorite hadn't been mentioned at that Paleontology Museum.
Beyond reasonable doubt now?
I saw a documentary last week or the week before.
From Catalyst?
It was not meteor.
It was a year or two ago that I heard that started to cast doubt on the Chicxulub crater, and then I've since heard more stuff since then.
So we won't.
Nah, the KT boundary and all the stuff they found looks pretty good. I mean, you can never be 100% sure, but I think it's coming back into favour. I think they still like the Mexican meteor.
But in America, it was the Great Flood, and then the Ark came out with all the animals on it.
Seems to be the most accepted theory, but it's not 100%.
There's a Noah's Ark theme park.
That's it. That's what I'm saying. So the next flood, due South Carolinas.
Yeah, but line up morons.
He's running out of money. He's actually come
Yeah, so this guide treated us to quite an impressive history from Percival Lowell, who's probably the best known, saying to study life on Mars, about the canals. And mentioned Vesto Slipher's spectra of galaxies, showing them rushing away from us, and how we all, as Newton said, we stand on the shoulders of giants. Everyone sort of learns from who went before them. Slipher showing the galaxies rushing away. This is what Hubble that sort of learned from that expanding universe. Led to the notion of an expanding universe.
So this was before Hubble?
Vesto Slipher, yeah.
Later and built on it, took his own spectra as well.
Hmm.
Hubble ended up analysing thousands of spectra.
Okay. So these guys...
Yeah. This is, Slipher would be 19th century, I think. Yeah, about 1880s. But he actually led to the notion of an expanding universe, and the rest sort of we hear about Hubble. So while we were there were crowds of us. Someone set up a 16-inch telescope, like a Dobsonian mount, so it was portable. And we looked through that at a couple of northern delights we don't see down here. So I looked at a star in Ursa Major, Vega, and the Northern Crown, which you actually can see here, and constellation of Cygnus. And Clyde Tombagh's discovery of Pluto, that's sort of well documented there at the observatory. And quite a bit on Vera Rubin too, who died recently. And of course compelling evidence that an unknown kind of dark matter actually probably makes up most of the universe. Now, I think one of the highlights was Stitlauer. They were talking in inches here, but later observed it was all metric. So I think it's a bit of almost like heritage. You say 24-inch, you don't put it into metric. The Clark refractor. And this intrigued me. The dome was made of ponderosa pine. My first reaction was, oh, fire broke out. And you can just see the truck wheels, the dome rotate on truck wheels. And it gave it a rather novel appearance, I think like a barn. And we queued up there and had a quick look at a cluster in Pegasus. And I thought this was a novelty because Pegasus doesn't get that high here in our summer. And also the Apollo astronauts did a lot of their training on this telescope before they went to the moon. And the last observed at Kitt Peak, that was quite a buzz going there. Have many been to Kitt Peak? Oh, I know, Ian, you get to all of them. So that shows you exactly many universities are involved in Kitt Peak. And a few interesting things to look at. Sundial there gives, you might be able to read the coordinates there. This says we're walking in, I don't know, it must have been 40 degrees again, up the mountain to the telescopes. And sun clock, that was interesting. You can see the 15-degree graduations each hour. And a few amusing signs took our mind off the heat. And I was intrigued about the one about the day's sleepers because I thought most astronomers, their work now was during the day, like a lot of robotic stuff, and I thought most astronomers were on the end of computer readouts over the years. But anyway, there were a few signs which I found rather novel. This was impressive, the largest telescope dedicated to solar studies. And that tower is 30.5 metres, and this slants down 61 metres to the ground. And it actually has a 3-mirror heliostat up here. That's a 2 metre one. You can see that's the main mirror. So it's a 3 mirror thing that tracks the sun. And it directs, the heliostat directs the sunlight down a shaft, right down into the mountain, to another image-forming concave mirror. And this mirror returns the beam part of the way back up, losing some of my details. And then you view it at the prime focus, which we could see. We could see sunspots showing there in real time. We're a little bit, I think we're a bit below ground there. So all the scientific work's done under the mountain. And it's used McMath Pierce, was get around the wrong way. It's used to study the structure of sunspots and sunspot spectra. And long-term studies provide data fundamental to understanding the solar activity cycle and sudden energy releases into the solar atmosphere. We just saw 3 telescopes there, but I think the whole Kitt Peak facility was about 26 telescopes. So we went to, that was the main one, the solar one. Then the 2.1 called Robo, because it's robotic, doesn't need any human touch at all, apparently, and the AA adaptive optics. And it's made a lot of important discoveries in astrophysics. It's discovered the first pulsating white dwarf and discovered indications of very distant clouds of hydrogen gas and the first gravitational lens. A lot of work's been done with that. Now, the last telescope we saw when we were all half dead, I think, with the heat, I think it's about 18 stories high, the whole facility, was the mile 4 metre. And it studies in infrared and faint visible light. And something was interesting, I'm always finding the novel appearance in something. When you look at it, it looked like origami. It's made up of 10 hexahedrons, the building. That's quite interesting. And it has a 15-tonne primary mirror, so it's just huge. We were going in the lifts a bit. We went to various sort of observing areas, so you're going up in a lift. So it's done a lot of work, produced colour images of objects. Can't quite remember why I focused on the Pinwheel Galaxy. There's something of interest. And again, with the galaxies, observing the rotation curves in order to determine the role of dark matter. And Simpson helped to establish the dynamical structure of elliptical galaxies. So that's still doing a lot of work, but I heard recently that the McMath Pierce is going out of operation, the big solar scope, or it has gone out of operation. So I don't know whether there's going to be something more modern or outlive this usefulness. Now, in concluding, I always get back to some almost philosophical thing. We're looking at things so far away, and I've done a lot of occultation work with the Astronomy Society, and we're looking at parts of a second, like viewing different events. How something so huge, like the universe, and yet we start looking at these fine details, chase an eclipse for 2.5 minutes, the total phase. That something took my eye was Kepler's quote. This was at the Mile telescope. And I think just makes you stand back a bit and just think. And if you can all read, I'm not sure that's a bit dark, a bit hard to read from here actually. We do not ask for what purpose the birds do sing, for their song is pleasure enough. Oh, pleasure. They were created for singing. Similarly, we ought not to ask why the human mind, now I can't read the very end word, let's start from here, fathom the secrets of the heavens. The diversity of the phenomena of nature is so great, and the treasures hidden in the heavens so rich, precisely in order that the human mind shall never be lacking in fresh nourishment. And I thought that sums it up. Why do we go chasing parts of a second? And I thought it was just a nice thing to sort of end that. Well, that was the end of our tour at Kit Peak, and yeah, I just liked reading that. And I've often said to Jim, there was it was mentioned about some wise old sage, which wish I could remember his name. He says we're not meant to know most of the secrets of the universe. Now, a lot of astronomers wouldn't agree with that, because I guess once you think you know everything, some of the excitement's gone. A bit like 110 minutes of totality. That took away the excitement for a director of solar studies, which was quite strange. So I like to just sort of think on that at the end. But yeah, I'll still go and chase another eclipse, and I'll still watch something very minute through the telescope. But that was the end of our tour in Kit Peak. And yeah, we're ready for the next one. We're thinking we might go to Chile 2019 for an eclipse trip. Depends on the pocket, of course.
The Americans don't recognise that. They're saying the next one's in 2024. That's only because it crosses America.
Yeah, across the USA.
Yes, further. Oh, it's quite a different part. Yeah, it'll be a different part. Yeah. Yes.
The Chile 2019 one I've been actually following for some years now. It's like, come on, 2019. But it presents a very delightful problem, because it's exactly the same month, almost to the week, of the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11. Ooh. And there's going to be major things happening in Australia around that event. And I'm thinking there'll only be one 50th anniversary of Apollo 11, but as rare as they are, there will be more than one solar eclipse. Now, the other side of that is that the solar eclipse in Chile largely goes over all those superb super telescopes that are in the Atacama Desert.
It goes over.
It's made to order for them. So where do you go? You can't go one place at a time.
This one in 2019 goes over La Serena, I think.
Right over La Serena.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying that no, there's going to be a major festival, a series of events relating to Apollo 11 50th anniversary.
Yes, I didn't think on that actually.
Yeah, so
yes.
It's actually a vexed issue.
So you think we're better here or go to Chile?
It's only going to be one 50th anniversary of Apollo 11.
Well, I've written Chile off because I suffered elevation sickness.
Yes.
You won't suffer elevation sickness in the Atacama. It's not like
Well, if you have at the telescopes, you will.
Yeah.
Because I was at 10,000 feet, and these ones are at 15,000, and most astronomers can't stay up there for long anyway.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what La Serena is, the altitude, but it's fascinating. In 1991, Mauna Kea in Hawaii was right in the path of that eclipse, and because of the altitude, they saw the eclipse all right, because a lot of Hawaii was clouded out. But that hardly touched Baja California, Mexico, in the afternoon, but it didn't. There wasn't a lot of land, that eclipse. And we often said it's amazing that Mauna Kea Observatory was in the path. Yes.
There's another one following year, 2020, crosses Chile and Argentina, a bit further south.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that's set in winter.
No, I think that's the summer one.
That's the summer one.
When's the next Melbourne one? I remember the Melbourne one.
There's one little Sydney.
30-something. Not in your program.
Not in our time. I think one crosses part of Australia, about 2028.
From Kimberley across to Sydney.
Yeah.
Oh, is it?
Sydney.
Which is a little bit different than the one in 1922, 22 or 27, was the northwestern coast, went right down through the deserts to southeast Queensland. So this is the only one that sort of crossed, not exactly the same path, of course, but it'll cross Australia. So we say we might be on our walking sticks, but we're going to try and see it.
There is a little bit of totality also on the peninsula that includes Exmouth in 2023.
Yes, I think it's what's called a hybrid. Is it a hybrid eclipse?
It starts out as annular,
Then goes total
and then back to
for just a few seconds, I think. Yeah. So I'll leave you with that thought. But that won't stop us trying to grab another 2 or 3 minutes.
I'm going to do what that woman in Texas did. I'm going to write in a letter to get them to move the chilly eclipse. They could delay it by a week or 2.
Oh, yes.
Sorry, Patricia, in your travels at
Yes.
the Pierce telescope,
Yes.
you said they took image of the solar activity. Did you actually see any images from the recent eclipse there?
Wouldn't have been in the path of the eclipse, not the total phase. Actually, there was no mention. It's interesting that I would imagine that would have observed be quite a degree of obscuration, because Arizona, that's not that far south of where we saw a total eclipse, but I'm sure it would have studied maybe the sunspots. Yeah, the eclipse actually wasn't mentioned.
Magnification would be such that the eclipse is meaningless on a telescope of that size.
Probably, yeah.
Spots are more in their frame of focus.
Yes. No, but there was no mention that it really studied anything on that day. It would be partial eclipse, but yeah, quite a big partial area. So I'll leave you with the envy. Now I'll just take this out.
I'll do that.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, Patricia. That was really, really great. We're going to have a little bit of a break, reset for the next section, and bring up the lights. So if we'll start again at about 10 to 9 or thereabouts, and perhaps you can continue the conversation about eclipses or about the venue or whatever turns you on. So, thank you. Or you might like to buy a book.
Oh, is that right? That's got nothing to do with it.
If we could. Hello.
When you're ready.
Try and.
We're streaming, by the way. We are streaming? We're streaming.
Where?
You had meal things up there before.
I won't need this.
Not as important as the bar, but that's important to the RSL on social nights like next week.
Okay, everyone, we'll make a start. So we're going to go into our space news segment. This will be just a quick update, and then we'll move on to Apollo 4, WRESAT, and our space science segment. So we've got Angelo to take us away with the space news.
All right. Thanks, everyone. I'm going to do a very quick presentation. It's really mainly videos, but what we'll do is some of my favourites for the month. So I'm not going to update a lot on the news, but let's get to it. I'm going to talk about the Space Launch System. Probably a year and a half ago, I think I did a presentation on it, maybe a year ago, and sort of said, look, 2018 we're going to launch this thing, or the Americans are, and that slowly slipped to 2019, and I read an article recently where it could actually slip into 2020. The danger for this project is that if Mr. Musk gets his BFR, Big Falcon rocket, going, which incidentally may have some government funds, certainly in the development of the Merlin engines, perhaps even in the development of the rocket itself, maybe the government might think twice about this whole program. So this, the slip is not going unnoticed in Congress, so who knows where this will go. The Orion capsule probably has a future because it really is the only deep space component of that system, but the SLS rocket in itself looks like a bit of a dinosaur compared to some of the coming technologies. Okay, but to that end, we'll show you the first mission called Exploration Mission 1, and it will show you that, and I was quite intrigued at the lunar orbit that this thing is going to do. But it's a good picture of it. It has the old markings on the solid rocket boosters. You can see those spiral markings. They've now been changed to give visual indicators of the rocket boosters so that they can be visually identified in terms of their motion and rates, etc. But the video is pretty good. So let's play the video.
In the next 8 minutes, you'll experience a 25.5-day mission from rollout to recovery. The first integrated flight test of the Orion spacecraft and the Space Launch System rocket launching from the Kennedy Space Center is about to unfold. This is the first of many missions to come that will use the Deep Space Exploration System to prepare our team, our ship, and our astronauts for human operations in deep space. Rollout from the Vehicle Assembly Building signals that launch is near. Sitting atop the mobile launcher, the crawler transporter moves along the crawlerway towards historic Launch Pad 39B at the Kennedy Space Center at a top speed of 1 mile an hour. After traveling over 4 miles, the rocket and the spacecraft climb up a ramp and are positioned over a flame trench. Once in position, the mobile launcher is lowered onto support post and the crawler is rolled away to a safe distance. Final checks are performed at the pad, including crew cabin closeout via the access arm sitting over 300 feet above the surface of the launch pad. The launch date is set, and the teams are prepared for the mission that is about to occur. It's sunrise on launch day. Engineers in the Launch Control Center have already powered up the spacecraft and the rocket and loaded the core stage and upper stage with cryogenic fuel. As launch window open approaches, final checks are performed, and when all systems are go, terminal countdown is initiated. The big physics of launch are about to be put on full demonstration. Umbilical plates weighing hundreds of pounds await their cue to retract to clear the path of the rocket at liftoff, some mounted on arms the size of tractor trailers. The mighty core stage engines are prepared for engine start as they are thermally conditioned for an onrush of cryogenic fuel in the heat of ignition. At T-minus 15 seconds, sound suppression is activated, cascading water into the flame trench to dampen the acoustic shock. And as the core stage engines achieve full throttle, shock diamonds appear. At booster ignition, the flame trench is flooded with fire. At first motion, all umbilical arms are retracted, and the rocket clears the tower in just seconds. At liftoff, the vehicle produces 8.8 million pounds of thrust and lofts the vehicle weighing nearly 6 million pounds and standing 32 stories tall to orbit. Propelled. In the next 8 minutes, you'll experience a 25 In the next 8 minutes, you'll experience a 25-and-a-half-day mission from rollout to recovery.
Nothing can go wrong. Nothing can go wrong.
Nothing can go wrong, you reckon? Plenty can go wrong.
I think that was a launch hold, wasn't it?
In the next 8 minutes, engines are prepared for engine start as they are thermally conditioned for an onrush of cryogenic fuel in the heat of ignition. At T-minus 15 on full demonstration. Umbilical plates weighing 100
here,
have already powered up the
showing
spacecraft,
on
and checks are performed at the pad, including
Realistic demonstration of SLS.
Can I just bear with me? There might be two versions going, and there are. Sorry, guys.
cascading water into the flame trench to dampen the acoustic shock.
See what happens.
And as the core stage engine...
Frozen again? You bugger.
Moving right along.
Do you have it non-embedded?
Yes, I have.
That would be better.
Bear with me. It won't take long. I should have...
Meantime, did you hear about the flat earther?
Tell me about this bloke.
He's launched the scrub. He didn't launch. He's going to launch on Saturday, and he posted he cancelled it.
So, is he going to launch it? And what? Can you just explain the theory behind his?
Well, it's obvious. The world is flat, and he wanted to go up high enough to prove it. But the reason water doesn't fly off the edge is because there's an ice boundary around the edge holding all the water in. And right, it's clearly flat. It's obvious, and it's turtles all the way down. We know that.
How insane!
An aeroplane?
No, a rocket. He's going to go up a couple of 1,000 feet in a rocket and take a photo to prove that the world is flat.
He's got the technology to launch a rocket.
He
feet.
doesn't believe in scientists. Science is all a plot of the Freemasons, right? So there is no such thing as science.
He could go up a tall mountain and be higher than how high his rocket's going to go.
Yep.
Or even an Australian mountain.
In fact, an actual mountain.
In the next 8 minutes, you'll experience a 25-and-a-half-day mission from rollout to recovery. The first integrated flight test of the Orion prepared for the mission that is about to occur. Full demonstration. Water into the flame trench to dampen the acoustic shock. And as the core stage engines achieve full throttle, will gather in full magnificent target during the interim corrupt propulsion stage.
Okay, let's go.
All right.
Control Houston.
Next.
Sorry, guys. We'll show it to you next time. But what I did want to show you very quickly, because I like this, is Sierra Nevada. And we can see our little...
See how this glides like a brick. This is an actual drop test.
Yes. Yep. This is the one that happened, what, about a month ago? Little under.
They had to keep the weight of the Dream Chaser down from its actual landing weight because the helicopter can only lift so much. So it's a lighter version of the actual re-entry weight of Dream Chaser.
We see left.
I would have thought so. Probably Elvis cost more to hire. Yeah, the Sky Crane. Cost more to hire?
We see a good lift. Nice job, 9 Charlie Hotel.
Don't quote me, but I think it's 12,000 feet.
Go. Release, release, release.
Release, release, release. There we go. Now,
Deep dive. Good flight control.
That's unpiloted.
Copy. Good flight control.
And have a look at the. That's a what? A 60 degree, maybe more.
Copy 8,000.
And then it does a rapid flare. It was dropped in the right direction, though. That's a good thing.
Good radar altimeters. Approach and land. PTIs. Copy approach and lands. PTIs are active.
See it? It wobbles a little bit. I saw that on the first flight too.
End of PTIs. Copy. PTIs complete.
They've actually got thermal protection system on this thing as well. Some of the real tiles.
400. Landing gear.
And they've got the front skid.
Gear deploy.
The front is a skid.
Good gear deploy.
At least all the landing gear came out this
5
time.
feet.
Cute.
Touchdown.
Ooh, little bounce. Another bounce. No, there he is. Now, of course, they've got the commercial resupply 2 contract, and they've got the cargo version, which means there won't be any astronauts. It will fly around about 2020.
We're in approach.
So they're apparently not going to have any more test flights.
Let's go ahead and monitor your systems.
Drop test flights.
Monitor your systems.
So they'll go straight to the first flight in 2020 on an Atlas.
Wheel stop.
So that'd be pretty cool. Now, we've got a break coming up. Coming key events over the Christmas period. I just wrote down a couple of things that you might want to look at over the next 2 months. Of course, in the next few days, we've got CRS 13. What makes that interesting is it will go out of Space Launch Complex 40, which is the one that they satisfactorily blew up in September last year, and they needed to have that pad going to allow Falcon Heavy to go. So that's the first one. We've got Rocket Lab, Electron. We're not quite sure. Has anyone heard any more? But that launch is imminent. Interestingly enough, one of the Moon Express is using that as a launcher to get to the moon by March when the Lunar X Prize expires. So they've got to get on with it. The next one is the top secret Falcon 9 Zoomer. That particular one, they stopped the launch because of fairing issues. We don't know any more than that, but apparently it's something to do with the fairing. So they'll reassign that at some point. In 12th of December, we've got an Ariane with the Galileo. That's the navigational constellation that the Europeans are using. We've got a Delta IV with the big, the big Delta IV with the NROL 47, another one of those. They're spectacular to watch. We've got another Soyuz mission, and we've got a Falcon 9. I haven't got all the flights here because there's more flights internationally, but I've just picked out some of the keys. And of course, the big question mark is that Falcon Heavy at the end of the month. It probably will slip into January, but it seems to be going according to schedule. Then we've got some Falcon 9, Ariane again, Pegasus, back to Falcon 9 CRS 14, Progress. But with intervening period, we've got SpaceX, China, Russia, India and Japan will also be launching during that period. The other thing that you might watch out for is that Stratolaunch. I heard a rumour that maybe in December will fly their Stratolaunch carrier, which is a humongous aircraft. So keep your eye out for that. So that's it. Thank you.
Andrew, do you want to come up? Oh, I thought we were doing that at the end. Aren't we?
Just leave this cables just here. Right. 50 years ago.
Sorry, did you want this bit streamed or do you want me to stop? 50 years ago.
Straight off there's fine.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, 50 years ago on Wednesday to the day, Australia's first satellite to reach space was built. Was launched. It was the second built Australian satellite. It was built in only 11 months and was built as a result of the generosity of the United States, the United States, the United States and the United Kingdom. What happened was that Australia has a rocket base called Woomera, which was built for the Joint Defence Project, which was basically so Britain could develop missiles, notably the Blue Streak, amongst others, and it tested huge numbers of missiles. The Americans wanted to test re-entry vehicles for missiles, and they wanted about recover the bits and things, which you can't do if you launch from Vandenberg or Florida or somewhere like that, because they fall on the ocean, whereas here the bits, if you need them, fall on the land. So the Americans brought down 10 Redstone rockets. Now Redstone is the rocket that, in a modified version, launched Explorer 1, the first American satellite, and launched a number of Mercury missions, most notably Mercury's 3 and 4, with Alan Shepard and Gus Grissom. So the Redstones were shipped here with 2 upper stages, liquid-fueled Redstone and solid fuel upper stages. And they were launched with great success from Woomera, high altitude, and then dove the things down. And it was called Sparta, an acronym of which I can't remember, but the A in the end means Australia. So it's a re-entry test. When they were nearing the end of the Sparta missions, the Americans said to the Australians, look, we brought down 10 rockets, but we're going to be done with this project after shooting off 9 of these. Now, it's going to cost us a fortune to ship the one remaining rocket back to the United States. When it gets back there, it's going to be declared redundant and just scrapped. Do you want the rocket? Well, Australians typically said, well, we don't think so. But several people pushed and pushed and pushed, and finally the argument went through Cabinet, Federal Cabinet, who finally gave the approval, yes, provided you can guarantee it's going to be successful and that there's not going to cost us much and that we are not going to get egg on our face and things like that. And of course, the people at the Weapons Research Establishment said, sure, we can guarantee all those things. Well, they got lucky. So in 11 months, the satellite was built. The instrumentation was partly United States and partly University of Adelaide. I'm going to show you some of the pictures from John Carver, who was the Professor of Physics at Adelaide University. Those pictures have been kindly given to me by his son, also a John Carver, who is a professor at the Australian University. Australian National University or University of New South Wales, Canberra. I can't remember which of the two. Anyway, he's given me these pictures. We've also got a few clips. There's not much video of the rocket. So we're going to just head into RESAT then and show you. Now, I'm on the space show on the radio program. I am running at the moment a series. Now, if I do, this is a Windows machine, so if I click on that, it should be able to call up all the others as well. Keep using a photo app. Never heard of it. What? Click OK?
Yeah, press OK.
Yeah, all right. Now, these aren't in order chronologically, and John Carver also took pictures of other things happening at Woomera. So here's one of the test chambers and some of the equipment that's being used to run the test on RESAT. Now you can see RESAT here. It's a conical shape. It was built around the third stage of the Sparta rocket. And these guys are doing, I don't know whether the John Carver's in there or not, because I've got no captions of these. This is a payload for a Skylark rocket, which is high atmospheric sounder. 2 days after RESAT was put into orbit, a Skylark rocket was launched from Woomera to do upper atmospheric measurements in coordination with those being done by RESAT. But I don't think that's the one. Okay, back to RESAT. Now, an interesting little story, which I got partway through last week's space show, and I'll finish off on Wednesday, is to do thermal control, they painted the outside a mix of black and white. As you know, black absorbs radiation, but it also radiates radiation very well. White reflects, basically, doesn't absorb much. So they painted it black and white on the outside, but the inside, they knew they had to get the control on that. Well, they consulted the Americans. I said this is a US project to some degree. And the Americans said, oh yes, you've got to use this special paint on the inside that will keep the temperatures right inside. So the special paint was ordered from the United States, and it duly arrived at great expense. And then about 10 coats of this paint were painted on the inside of this satellite in a marathon session that lasted about 2 days, interrupted only by visits to the pub by the painters. Well, just before they launched this thing, they found out that the wrong paint had been sent from the United States. What to do? Wait, hold the launch? Well, they couldn't do that because the Americans who were going to launch this thing for us, because we don't know how to launch rockets, do we? Their TRW group of experts who were launching the Redstone rockets, they couldn't hang around for much longer. And so they wanted to get this rocket away and get back home to their loved ones back in the United States. So they said, oh gosh, well, we better go with it. Well, it turns out that the paint was no different than if they'd used household enamel. Ordinary household enamel, when they'd painted that, it would have performed no different. And it kept the temperatures to within 2 degrees of what had been predicted anyway. So we wasted a lot of money on buying paint that didn't work. Anyway, so here's some of the instrumentation being assembled here. I won't go through all the experiments that are on board because that'll take 2.5 space shows to describe. So listen in on Wednesday and next week. And here we are. We've now got the Redstone, and it's 2 upper stages, hence called the Sparta rocket. They're on the launch pad waiting for launch. And the temperatures on the days that it was being launched were reaching up near 50 degrees, between about 45 degrees or thereabouts. which is not unusual for warm mirror. And here's the almost completed satellite before the panels are put on. And you can see a model of that satellite in the Woomera Heritage Museum at Woomera. Skylark, no, I think it's a Skylark, I'm not sure. And I don't think that's the one that was, it was launched, it was obviously on the thing at the time that John Carter was at Woomera, and I don't know how many times he went there. So I have no information on that. Here we are back with the rocket on the pad ready to go. And he must have got a helicopter ride at some point, because we've got shots from the helicopter of the rocket about to be erected. And there it's now on the pad ready to go. And if you watch the video we're going to show in a moment, you might see this helicopter or similar flying around just before the launch. So I don't know whether it's the same time helicopter, I don't know. Now, a couple other little pictures here from Woomera. This is the Aldo launch pad, back before the Aussies got and decided to bomb the hell out of it. And another one of these nearly finished rocket satellite. And we have there a sounding rocket launch. And that's the flame trench from the Aldo thing. How many of you have been there? Hands up. Yeah, a few of us. Okay, great. Gives you the scale. The car gives you a scale of the flame trench. I did warn you these are not in order. It's getting the data down from one of the sounding rockets in WRESAT. And we have liftoff. I was going to play a little audio here at this point, but I thought, nah, you can listen to the space show, hear it then. And back to the Aldo launch pad. Another sounding rocket. And WRESAT again. Now pretty much nearly finished. And who knows what that rocket is? It's not WRESAT, obviously. Okay, that's one of the British rockets, the Black Knight, I think.
Put in the quiz next week.
Sorry?
I'll put it in the quiz.
Yeah. But how many, while you're looking at that, how many of you cast your eye over here and we have a second one on the pad at the same time? Both with umbilicals. See the umbilical cords? So that was obviously going to be a simultaneous or near simultaneous launch. Again, I have no information about when that photo was taken. Right, and I think we're near the end. That looks like Jack Absalom. Ah, this thing has gone into movie mode. All right, now let's have a look at the historical stuff first. And I've not found the complete video in one thing. So, all right. It'll start. Oh, have we got sound? There is sound on this. Yep, it's up 100%. Oh well, I'll give you my own commentary. So after assembling it, they trucked it out to the launch pad, erected it, fueled it up with liquid oxygen and kerosene. Of course, the upper stages were solid propellant. And the Aussies had painted their own little kangaroo on the side, just to show it's Australian, not American. No bald eagle on that one. Now, all those guys who were taking pictures, if we could find those pictures, it'd be fantastic. And here we have almost liftoff now. You've seen the umbilical drop away, and away we go. Yippee. Heading north. Over the Gulf of Carpentaria, the Redstone stage dropped into the Simpson Desert, and the course was specifically plotted to avoid Papua New Guinea.
The first stage was recently found by Dick Smith.
Yeah, I'm coming to that. Yes. I decided not to show my own slides tonight, so I could have set up the slide projector and shown you. And yeah, there's the trail way in the sky as we lose sight of it. Now, on the space show, I'm going to be playing an interview with Peter Pockley, who did the commentary for the ABC on this and how it was all done. Next video. Oh, okay.
Sensors received a final check using a hydrogen light source rich in ultraviolet. The space between was flushed with nitrogen gas to prevent oxygen absorption. The radar transponder received a final check. Finally, the covers were fitted, the nose cone was screwed down, and WRESAT was ready. It was then taken to the launching area for mating to the rocket. Here, with great care, to the relief of some and the confusion of the skeptics, it mated up perfectly, and the whole assembly was ready for launching. Erection was completed, the umbilical cord was attached. Through this cord, monitoring functions were maintained and power was supplied to ignite the rocket engines. In the nearby control van, missile functions were checked. When all was well, the countdown began. The optical tracker had a hazy view of the launcher scene due to the high ground temperature. As the countdown proceeds, the heater-cooler drop tank is shed. Light up. Lift off.
So that is part of a documentary prepared by the Weapons Research Establishment, and no one, not even the National Film and Sound Archive, seems to have the full video. This one...
It was then taken to the launching area for mating to the rocket.
Is the same, but I think... Yeah. You notice that it had a different beginning and so on. So that's available from WRE, but again, they don't have the whole thing, and yet it's their own video. And once again, another version, which again ends in it. So that's a different resolution of it. Come on. What's happened? Okay, let's quit. Now, here we go with a guy called Jack Absalon. I've got to start it at 22 minutes in. All right. So just forward to 22 minutes if I can. Oops, 25, gone too far. And this gives you... This guy's sort of driving around Australia and just videos and stuff.
This is the artist.
And So this lets you, for those of you who don't know where Wilma is, 22 minutes, about there. Okay.
With dry salt lakes that only fill after heavy rains. So far, I've left the Gawler Ranges behind me. I've come through all this beautiful lake area to Kingunya, which is on the Transcontinental Railway, and now I'm at Woomera. This is harsh country out here. These rooms used to be the overnight stop for travellers. I stayed out here over 50 years ago when it was called the Ponds. In those days, people used to say it was the middle of nowhere. But an important thing happened in 1947. The British had been looking for somewhere to set up a rocket range. The Germans had literally blown them to pieces with rockets and buzz bombs and that throughout the war. And they'd had enough of this. They said, never again will we get caught like this. So they were going to have rockets of their own, just in case. So Woomera Rocket Range was set up, which I'm looking at now. Woomera was a very exciting place for the scientists in the 1950s and 60s and the early 70s. In fact, the rockets at the Woomera Heritage Park give an indication of the activity that was going on here. There were space experts from around the world, and surprisingly, in those days, Australia was a world leader in the rocket industry. Now, to me, the most interesting one of all is this one. This is the Jindavic, and the Jindavic was designed as a target aircraft. It was remote controlled, but to get it remote controlled, it had to be piloted for the first couple of flights because they couldn't work out how to handle it properly. But most importantly, it was Australian. It was the first one we made ourselves. We developed this, and when it was developed at the time, it was the best in the world, and this was in the 1950s.
This is the beginning of takeoff of the Mark II aircraft on the specially designed tricycle trolley. The trolley is separate from the aircraft and is left on the ground when the aircraft takes off. At a fixed, predetermined speed, the aircraft is unlatched from the trolley. The steep angle of climb after release from the trolley is quite evident in this picture.
There were over 2,000 rockets launched from Woomera before it was closed down in the 1970s. But there's a piece of space junk that I want to show you. It's only a piece of wreckage, but it made history. I've told you many stories over the years, but I don't believe there's one as amazing as this one. Really amazing because it was a story, or is a story, of a great Australian achievement. In the early 1960s, the Americans came out here and brought 9 of these Redstone rockets. They had some specific tests they wanted to do. And after they'd finished all these tests and got all the information, they still had one rocket left. And they said to the Australian government, here, look, we don't want to take this thing home, you have it. So Australia said, okay. Now, it's all right having a rocket, but you've got to have some purpose for it. So after thinking for a while, they come up with the idea that they wanted a satellite. They could get a satellite and put it in the rocket, they could launch a satellite. So they approached the Australian universities, and I think practically every university was tangled up in this, and they, unbelievably, produced a satellite in 11 months. That's amazing. Put it in the rocket, press the button, and away she went. And everything went to perfection. Rocket worked for its whole lifespan perfectly. It's finished, of course, now because that was launching was in 1967. And when Australia launched that rocket, it became the 4th country in the world, behind America, Russia and France, to launch its own satellites. Now, to me, that's an amazing feat.
The first stage is all burnt. It separates and falls away into the Simpson Desert. The second stage was destined to fall into the Gulf of Carpentaria to the north of Australia.
Now, after this rocket had done its job, got the satellite up, it came down. And it came down in the Simpson Desert. But nobody knew exactly where it was. Then Dick Smith got a bit of a whisper. And away he went in his whirlybird. out to the Simpson Desert, and he found it, located it, and he advised the people where it was, and they thought it was worth retrieving. So out they go and bring it in, and they put it here, roughly as they found it in the Simpson Desert. And I reckon that's a marvellous story. NASA came here to test rockets, and test rockets they did. But the most expensive and ambitious project was ELDO, the European Launcher Development Organisation. And their rockets blasted off from right here. Isn't that massive? And that is a real part of our history, because this was the main launching pad at Woomera Rocket Range. Look, let's just have a look at it. Look, it is massive. Tons and tons. But imagine up on the top there a gantry with a rocket in it on top of this. And the rocket on the top would weigh 105 tons. It would be 104 feet 6 tall. That's amazing. And imagine when they rolled the gantry back and pressed the button. All hell broke loose here, because this would all be flames that would come across here and go across this valley into the hill on the other side. Amazing. And away went the rocket.
Listen to the words of the controller as he predicted 15 minutes earlier what everyone hoped would happen.
-7 seconds, engine ignition. -4 seconds, engines at full thrust. At 0 time, release jacks open, vehicle liftoff.
Admit this is very impressive, and really it's nothing to what it would have been in its heyday. In fact, I believe Australia should still be in the rocket business. I'm at the right place here to do this. I'm going to launch a rocket. I'm going to launch the Absalom rocket and start us back into the rocketry again. Now, mine is not going to be as complicated as all this with all this gear, just nice and simple. Have a look at that. Isn't that a whizzer? I'll tell you what, that'll give the superpowers something to think about, because Australia's now back into the rocket business.
Okay.
Despite the sophistication of the nearby rocket base, this remains a very desolate, dangerous country. Even a simple breakdown.
All right. So that's the story of WRESAT. The first attempt to launch was actually 50 years ago tomorrow, but they had a problem just before liftoff, as often happens in rocketry, and so they tried the next day. And that story is told by Peter Pockley, who was one of the ABC science reporters. He became the voice of Apollo for Australia during the Apollo missions. And he tells the story on the Space Show about how the ABC sent him to Woomera with a colleague, and how they had no way, they were way out of ABC radio range. And so he was doing this live commentary into a microphone, and they just prearranged. Look, at 7:15, you start your commentary, and the ABC set up so that at 7:15 they'd take the feed, and he just had to start doing the commentary, hoping it was going on, and he wasn't just talking for nothing, and it all worked. So an interesting story that Peter has to tell. Now, very quickly now, I think that's the WRESAT stuff. We are going to look at Apollo 4, he says, SA 2018 November. Okay, Apollo 4, and I didn't bring the DVDs because I put them away after talking to you. Okay, anyway, we've got the two videos to show, which is more than the time we've got. On the DVD, there's one little video that you see on every film about space almost. I mean, it can be a Delta launch from Vandenberg, or it can be a little Tom Thumb rocket going up. And they always show this interstage of the Saturn V dropping away and the first stage dropping away. And you know, it's just like if you've got you're showing a golfing match, and so you kick in the home goal, what do they call it, the winning goal in AFL football. Oh, no, the difference is a golf ball, AFL ball, what's the difference, who cares? That's the sort of thing that they do in space movies. So you see that all the time. I don't know if it shows up in this film, because I forgot to, I was going to show you the full thing. They had 2 camera pods on Apollo 4, on the Saturn V, showing that separation, 1 on each side of the vehicle. It only runs about 3 minutes, but it's the whole thing. Sorry, I forgot to bring it. I left home in a hurry, which is why I was editing stuff over there before. Righto, all up video. This is the
as Apollo 4
NASA
stood
film
ready for
released earlier
takeoff
this
on
year.
Pad 39 on November 9th, 1967, the success of the entire moon mission hung in the balance.
Hey, how are we going to get to the moon if we can't talk between 3 buildings?
Just months earlier, the tragic loss of Apollo 1 put the success of the entire space program in doubt. Yet, while the nation still mourned and Congress investigated the tragedy, NASA pushed ahead for a daring all-up test of both the Saturn V rocket and the Apollo capsule.
The Germans believed in the building block concept. We test the booster, everything above the booster is dummy. Once we're happy with the booster, then we put a live second stage on. Once we're happy with the second stage, we go to the third. So that was the way Saturn I was developed.
Liftoff +2.
By contrast, to develop the Saturn V, George Miller, the director of NASA's Office of Manned Space Flight, chose a radical departure from the past.
The trouble with doing it sequentially is that you have all of the problems of one stage, and then when you add the second stage, you've got a whole new set of problems.
That was a departure from conventional wisdom.
We never put all hot stages on the vehicle.
There was no way we were going to be able to finish that program in 10 years.
It was not well received by von Braun's lab director.
Once I convinced Werner and the team down here, I convinced the rest of them. We ended up going all up.
All indications coming in to the control center at this time indicate we are go.
At dawn on November 9th, 1967, that decision would be put to the ultimate test. Failure could bring an untimely end to the program. Success would usher in a new era of exploration.
Guide 5, roll, go. Count 3, go. Intake, go. Econ, go. Launch commit, go.
And 501 was the big bird that we put on the pad, and that was something to see. Saturn V come off the pad at the Cape.
It's hard to describe a Saturn launch up close unless you've been there. It's just vibration and noise. Many times I'd see the women burst out in tears, and the men too. It would just be an emotional experience.
This is the shot you always NASA's all-up gamble paid off. With the success of Apollo 4, the nation had the rocket it needed to get to the moon.
Channel 9 used to have a program called Sunday, and in their opening sequence they had that shot played every Sunday. The actual film runs 3 minutes per pod, so you've got 3 minutes on one side, 3 minutes on the other, and it's quite a lengthy sequence and shows the complete process. We don't have time to show all of this, but we'll just see a little bit of it.
Apollo Saturn V, designed to propel the United States manned lunar landing mission. 3 million parts from the labor of people at 20,000 companies, universities, and government facilities. A first stage assembled in Louisiana, using parts from Kansas, Missouri, Washington, and many other states. A second stage shipped to the Kennedy Space Center in Florida through the Panama Canal from California, with a stopover in Mississippi for testing. A third stage, flown from California to Florida. An instrument unit from Alabama. The spacecraft came from factories in Oklahoma, New York, and California. And electronic systems came from such widely separated sources as Massachusetts and Wisconsin. Major equipment to prepare, test, launch, guide, track, and recover the spacecraft are the products of Minnesota, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Ohio, Tennessee, and other states. The Apollo 4 mission, unmanned, first flight for Apollo Saturn V, was launched into Earth orbit November 9, 1967. The Saturn V and its spacecraft stand as high as a 36-story building, and at liftoff weigh more than a U.S. Navy destroyer. Its Earth orbital payload is 10 tons greater than John Glenn's entire Mercury Atlas space vehicle of 1962. It is moved from its assembly building by a massive crawler transporter over a roadway designed to handle the combined weight of more than 12 million pounds. Watched over in minute detail by an extraordinarily complex array of facilities. It answers to a chain of electronic eyes and ears that circle the world. And it flies a course dictated by an assembly of advanced computers. It is the result of the work of some 300,000 Americans in the disciplines of science, engineering, technology,
I'm going
and
to
management.
push this forward to the launch. And, oh, that's the flight trajectory they did on that Apollo 4 mission. Ah, here we go.
Exactly as planned, Apollo 4 lifted off at 1 second after 7 o'clock, November 9th, 1967, with its first stage delivering 7.5 million pounds of thrust. Minutes and 32 seconds later, as scheduled, the first stage burned out and separated, having consumed 4.5 million pounds of fuel. The separation and second stage ignition were also recorded by cameras carried on board the vehicle, 40 miles above the Earth. The camera gave engineers a close-up look at another event, the separation of the interstage structure. This was critically important because clearances were extremely small between the structure and the engines. Shown in animation, the second stage performed perfectly for more than 6 minutes, a source of major developmental problems.
All right, well, we'll have to leave it at that point. Now, I do have a little story to tell now that our meeting is officially closing and we say goodbye to our online viewers. Now, as you know, Australia has launched, or had launched 4.